Hello everybody, and welcome to our first week 3 session. Now, earlier this week, I sent you all a brief reading, an introduction to earthquakes. And so this is what we're going to be talking about today. But rather than just going over all of that general earthquake information, I hope these sessions might give you a new perspective on how you can teach about this topic. So, looking forward to talking about some earthquakes. Now, when we think about earthquakes, oftentimes, whether it be in class or in the media, there are so many words. Things like intensity, magnitude, epicenter, tectonics, and faults. And to be honest, these words can get very confusing. So, for our lessons, we're going to break these down step by step. And honestly, one of the best places to start is to think about earthquakes being all about energy. And it's the observation of this energy that we can use to understand spatial patterns. So in thinking about observing energy, the best place to start is this idea of earthquake intensity. Intensity is a qualitative measurement of the strength of the ground shaking at a particular site. It's subjective, as in it's based on what an individual can feel and observe. Now, because it is subjective, it's not always the easiest measurement to compare about earthquakes. So, to provide some structure to intensity measurements, researchers across the world have developed different scales. This one is called the Modified Mercalli Intensity Scale, or MMI. And if you study earthquakes, it's something you'll see quite frequently. It was developed back in the early 1900s to measure this intensity of earthquakes and try to put some generalized observations behind different levels of shaking. This scale is not mathematically based, but again, is based on observed effects. It has a Roman numeral rating to give some numbers, but it describes shaking with a few different adjectives, saying the shaking was weak, light, all the way up to severe and extreme. And then it has descriptions for each of these shaking types, saying a weak earthquake is felt only by a few persons at rest, especially on upper floors of buildings. A strong earthquake is felt by everyone, and many people become frightened, right? There can be movement of some heavy furniture and slight damage to houses, all the way up to something that's violent, that's where we start to get some considerable damage, specifically in design structures. So this Mercalli scale, measuring intensity, is something that's great for starting to assess damage, which for students and for general public thinking about earthquakes, this is one of the most important things to understand because it's what's most observable. So what's really cool about these scales is we can actually use them to produce information about earthquakes. In many countries across the globe, they have these survey programs through their geologic services called Did You Feel It surveys, where after an earthquake happens, anybody can go online to these websites and enter in a survey to tell these geologic institutions if they felt it and the degree of intensity that they felt. What's awesome is that these inputs from the public generate data that can then be quickly mapped to show the perceived intensity of an earthquake. And so you can create these internet intensity maps that show areas affected by an earthquake and can help researchers identify where this happened. And so this information is so powerful because it can be used to map out earthquakes across the world. What I love about this map is it shows the power behind observation. You don't have to know everything behind the science of an earthquake in order to experience it, in order to provide meaningful observations that then show data. And as you can see, this is a map of all of the earthquakes that were felt in the year 2015. You can start to observe patterns within this system. Blue earthquakes being things that were less intense, and yellow dots representing earthquakes that were more intense. And from this distribution, you can see there's a certain pattern to where earthquakes occur and how intense they are. So we're going to dive into these patterns of intensity to learn more about earthquakes. Rather than just using this global data, though, I want to start with thinking about what we know and what we've experienced. So, for this first session, we are going to try to plot our own did we feel it earthquake experience. I am going to send you a link to a survey, much like our first icebreaker that we did all as a class. This survey is going to ask if you have felt an earthquake before and tell us some details about it. You can submit as many different experiences as you want, but let's try to do at least one. Once all of our data has been submitted, or as it is submitted, you can check out our class map, and we can see, can we find any patterns to earthquakes in Bhutan? If we can find these patterns, maybe we can start to understand why and how earthquakes are happening here. So I'll show you really quick. When you click on this link, which I'll send in VLE, that'll open up a survey webpage right here. PHG501 Earthquake Experience. To make a submission, I'll ask you to write your name, to identify a place where you felt an earthquake. Now remember, for these map questions, you can either type in a location, say I was in Thimphu when I felt an earthquake, and I'll zoom in, or you can drag the map to see somewhere new, and then if you find your location, if I was in Kurutan, I can simply click, and then my location will update. Make sure you plot yourself in the right location for where you felt this. Next question asks you to describe how this earthquake felt using this modified Mercalli intensity. Did it feel weak? Did it feel moderate, strong, violent? Check whatever you're feeling that you remember. And generally, if you can, try to remember what year did this happen. So say it would be 2014. And then I'd ask you to share, are there any reflections or memories? What might you have observed from that day? Only answer this question with whatever information you're comfortable with. So it could be like, wow, I observed, or how about I noticed there was lots of furniture moving in my house, something like that. Once you click submit, it'll work through your internet connection and you'll see if your data was successfully submitted. And then you can click on this earthquake experiences map. This will open you to a map that has a collection of all our data. And so, as our data is plotted on this map, we can start to see and think about our experiences. Where have we felt the strongest earthquakes? Where have we felt the weakest earthquakes? I want you to add your experiences through this survey, and then check out our class map. Can you find any patterns in our data? Let's see and find out.